Hi guys, मेरा नाम अमीश त्रिपाठी है and this is the Immortal India podcast, more specifically the Bhagavad Gita series of the Immortal India podcast. The Bhagavad Gita is a book that practically every Indian has heard of, every Indian in the modern day. Sadly, very few Indians have actually read the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, we can lay the blame on many things. भाई हमारी शिक्षा प्रणाली ही कुछ सिखाती नहीं है भगवद गीता के बारे में, वातावरण नहीं है. There are so many things. So my sister Bhavna Didi and I, we've decided that we're going to do a Bhagavad Gita series where it'll be an introduction to this beautiful spiritual text that is one of the foundations of the Indian way of life, of the dharmic way of life. Why are we specifically calling it the Bhagavad Gita series? Because there are many other Gitas. I don't know how many of you are aware of this. This is not the only Gita, but we will refer only to the Bhagavad Gita in this series. Didi, Bhagavad Gita, the song of our Lord,
The song of Bhagwan.
the song of Bhagavan. 18 chapters within the Bhagavad Gita, part of the Mahabharata.
Absolutely. And the Mahabharata itself is 18 chapters. And the Bhagavad Gita is found in the 6th chapter of the Mahabharata, which is the Bhishma Parva. It is in the 3rd section of the Bhishma Parva.
So, for those who do want to read the Bhagavad Gita in the original, check out the Mahabharata Bhishma Parva chapter 23 to 40. That is the Bhagavad Gita. The critical edition is available. Vivek Deva's fantastic translation.
It has 700 shlokas. The Mahabharata itself has over 1 lakh shlokas.
How many of you knew that? It is bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. 7 times bigger. Those who don't know what the Iliad was, you've seen that movie Troy? That was based on the Iliad. Okay? The Iliad and the Odyssey put together, Mahabharata is 7 times bigger.
And Avish, it is 3 times bigger than the Holy Bible, Old and New Testament put together.
Our ancestors really knew how to write, right? But there may be some who actually aren't very few. But there may be some who may need an introduction to the Mahabharata also. कि भाई ये किसकी कहानी है? चलिए उसके बारे में थोड़ा बात करते हैं कि what is Mahabharata the story of?
So, Mahabharata was a fight between cousins, right? In India, cousins are brothers and sisters. There's no such thing as cousins, right? So, it was a fight between brothers. On one side, the Pandavas, and the other side, the Kauravas. But you know what fascinates me about Mahabharata? There's no wrong versus right, good versus evil. The Kauravas had some great characteristics, and the Pandavas struggled with some weaknesses.
True. And actually at a surface level, the Kauravas represented emotions that can be considered negative. Jealousy, Irsha, greed. Duryodhan didn't even want to give 5 villages, not even, 5 inches of land to avoid the war. Itna greed, itna ahankar, itna insecurity. And whereas the Pandavas, he's tried to be compassionate, wisdom-driven, self-reflective, as Yudhishthira tried very often. लेकिन महाभारत के अंत में those who have read the original critical edition, कौरव स्वर्ग पहुंच जाते हैं और पांडव नरक पहुंच जाते हैं. I remember first time I had heard this. आप लोग कौन से बड़े हैं? आप और दादा is 6 years elder, दीदी is 8 years elder to me. तो मेरे जुड़ा भाई, हम लोग 4 भाई बहन. यहाँ यूपी में परिवार बड़े होते थे उस ज़माने में. तो दीदी इज़ 8 years elder, भावना दीदी. अनीश दादा इज़ 6 years elder. एंड आशीष मेरा जुड़ा भाई है, आशीष एंड आई. आशीष इज़ 12 minutes elder. तो दादा दीदी एक तरह से हमारे सेकंड मदर फादर से. कभी कभार मैं उनको मम्मी डैडी भी बोलता हूँ, सेकंड मम्मी डैडी. तो आप लोगों ने ये तो कहानी दे यूड हर्ड इट बिफोर अस. लेकिन आई रिमेंबर जब पहली बार मैंने सुना था कि भाई कौरव स्वर्ग पहुँचते हैं, पांडव नरक करे, ये क्या हो रहा है, ये क्या लॉजिक है, ये लॉजिक पूरा ट्रेजिक है.
So, to understand that, what you have to really know about is that charming story in the Mahabharata about Rishi Vaishyampayar and Janmejaya, the great grandson of the great Ashok, and what Astik had to say at the end of the battle, right? So, you know that the Gita actually is a conversation within a conversation within a conversation.
This is like the Inception book.
As
Dream within a dream within a dream. And many actually don't know this. There is the, as you seem so rightly, at the deepest level, not just philosophically, but even within the conversation. Lord Krishna and Arjun. Above that, who's describing this conversation? Sanjay and Dhritarashtra. Above that, which many people aren't aware of, Janmejaya and Vaishampayar.
But Amish, before you tell the story of Vaishyapan and Rishi Vaishyapan and Janmejaya, how do we know that it stops, the conversation stops over there, and that conversation is not embedded within another surface layer of a conversation? Because in the Mahabharata, nobody says Janmejaya Ubach.
But we will discuss Janmejaya and Rishi Vaishampayar's conversation. Before that, this is the Mahabharata itself. Because people, modern deal is such, we like to just judge who's he, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. And often people just approach the Pandavas and the Kauravas also in that way. And I found Ajkal, either there will be one extreme, which will be Pandavas are all good, Kauravas are all bad. Or this other extreme, the JNU type, who Pandavas are all bad, Kauravas are all, which is also as silly. Benthi, the nuance is lost, which our ancestors had.
Yes, because, if you look at it in polar terms, you think of the hero and the villain. Now, who's the hero and who's the villain? Mahabharata. Is it Duryodhana? But he was magnificent at the point of his death, as we see in the play Uruvanga. What a magnificent death. Magnificent man who learnt all his wisdom, the lessons that had to learn, which is why when Yudhishthir reached what he found.
Duryodhana. And Yudhishthir himself, he was Draud. He was, the son of Rambarav, the son of Lord Yama. And of course, he learned so much about, he knew it. But even he made mistakes. He gambled away his kingdom, gambled away his brothers and his wife. So,
he gambled away his kingdom and his brothers and his wife and yet reached Swarg. So why did he reach Swarg?
So actually, maybe the best way to look at the Mahabharata, and इसी तरह शायद देखना चाहिए. There is no hero or villain. There are people struggling with life, doing good deeds, doing bad deeds. कभी mistakes कर रहे हैं, कभी अच्छे काम कर रहे हैं, कभी ignorance में mistakes कर रहे हैं, कभी anger में mistakes कर रहे हैं, कभी they're learning from their mistakes. Sometimes they're not learning from their mistakes. Just like all of us. You can't say it's not just about Duryodhana and Yudhishthir. You can say, why was Ma Gandhari lying to the false of a son? You can say that. Was King Shahita, Bhishma Pitama, was he, did he commit mistakes? Because he was blind. Do some of the crime being done by his descendants? Absolutely. Or not his clear descendants, but because he obviously didn't have his own descent, but his family. Yeah, correct. कि भाई अपने स्वार्थ के लिए, अपने प्रेम के लिए अपने बेटे की बलि चढ़ाई.
A very worthy and deserving king to become king.
क्यों? क्योंकि भाई he fell in love with someone else, with another woman, and the condition of that marriage was कि भाई मेरा ही बेटा राजा बनेगा. Is that fair? Is that? तो इसमें actually in some ways they're a lot like us. There is no hero, there is no villain. There are people struggling with people's कठिनाइयाँ हैं और हमको झेलना पड़ता है. एंड जो भी हम लोग एक्शंस करेंगे, वो जो भी कॉन्सिक्वेंसेज आएंगे उसके, we have to handle it, we have to suffer it or enjoy it. That's the question. What is justice? And I think this is actually the perfect place to tell those who may not have heard about the story of Janmejaya and Rishi Vaishampayar. Because that is at the beginning. That's how the Mahabharata actually begins. And many may not be aware of.
So tell me this story.
You should tell this story. बड़े छोटे कुछ कहानी सुनाते.
हम दोनों कहानी सुनाए. So all good stories start with एक था राजा। ये जो राजा है परीक्षित, ये एक रानी का बेटा था। अरे so Parikshit was a son of the great Abhimanyu and of course Uttara. Abhimanyu we know is the son of the great Arjun himself. Now Parikshit one day was foretold that he's going to die within 7 days of a snake bite. He got scared, didn't want to die. He locked himself in his bedroom, refused to see his children, his ranis, his advisors, his mantris, nobody. He said, I'm going to remain in this room so that no snake can kill me of snake bite. Now, on the 7th day, he bit into a fruit. He bit into an apple. But the apple had a worm. And as soon as the worm breathed, it turned into the Naga Takshak. And Takshak bit the Raja and slithered away. And of course, Parikshit died. His son, which means the great-grandson of the great Arjun, Janmajay, he was very, very angry. He was the new king, you see, and he was livid. He said, I must have justice. And he ordered a Sarpasakta, which is a great yajna in which hundreds of priests were collected, and they sat in a great yajna to kill all the serpents from the earth. All the serpents were drawn out from their pits, from their underground worms, all of that slithering, crying, and hanging above the sacrificial fly. At which point, one voice was
The descriptions are so of this thing, that they are howling, they are being gone alive, and there's just they're begging for mercy.
It was a horrible atmosphere. At which stage, one voice stood up and said, Oh great king, stop. This was Astik. Interesting
Yeah.
that the name was Astik.
आस्तिक है, आस्तिक बिलीवर, तो जो आस्था है इसका, जो आस्तिक नहीं है. And interestingly, from what I remember, he actually told the king Janmajay कि आप अधर्म कर, ये धर्म नहीं है, ये अधर्म. And
But Janmajay said this is justice.
great.
So what is justice? Is justice vengeance? You know the Pashtun Wali code
Yeah.
of the Pathans? They define justice as vengeance.
Especially, और ये आजकल भी इतना दिखता है दीदी, this concept of community guilt and historical guilt. जिसने क्राइम किया वो तो मर गया, जिसके ऊपर क्राइम हुआ वो भी मर गया, and you're hating people from the community of that criminal. जैसे आजकल वेस्ट में देखने को मिलता है that they attack white people today because of what Churchill did or what Hitler did or what Churchill and Hitler are long dead. What does today's white man have to do with? लेकिन आज ये white man को अटैक करें, अपनी इंडिया में भी शायद ये होता. No, so many extremists on one side will say blame all Muslims for the crimes of Aurangzeb, which are true. Aurangzeb was a monster, worse than Hitler. What does he have to do today's Muslims? Correct? Or Alauddin Khilji, or Muhammad Ghori, all those horrific criminals. आज के मुसलमान से क्या लेना देना? And on the other extreme, there will be listening extremists that today's upper caste have to pay for the crimes that upper caste may have done, would have done. A century ago, Tamil Nadu mein Brahmins are attacked today because some Brahmins may have done something 100 years ago. और ये community guilt and natural, that's what Astik brings up, कि ये community और historical guilt, ये cycle of vengeance चलता रहे.
That's true, because what Astik told King Janmajay is that, Takshak is the Vanshaj of one of the serpents in Khandarprasth. And Arjun burnt the forest to create the great city of Indraprasth. And at that stage, Takshak was orphaned.
Because many of his ancestors died in the
And he swore that he will have his vengeance. And he could not have his vengeance with Arjun, with Abhimanyu, with finally, he got a chance with Parikshit.
So the talk was because I couldn't take vengeance against Arjun or Abhimanyu, क्योंकि वो तो they passed away already. तो मैं उनके वंशज परीक्षित को And then Parikshit's son Janmajaya said, because I cannot take vengeance against Takshak, मैं पूरे नागा संप्रदाय को मार. It's just endless
Fights.
violence and ये चलता रहेगा. And Astik raised that question, right? कि भाई today Nagas who had nothing to do with Parikshit's death are dying today. Their descendants will blame the descendants of Janmajaya. कि आपने हमारी पूर्वज को मारा था, हम आपको मारने की. ये चलता ही रहेगा. There is no end to it. There is no end to it.
At this stage, Janmajaya starts becoming confused because in his mind he was very clear that the Pandavas were right, his forefathers, and the Kauravas were wrong. So he said, but the great war, wasn't it fought for justice? Right, the victory of right over wrong. And then Astik said, it wasn't so simple, And he said to him that the Pandavas actually went to Narak. Why? Because at the end of the war, they gloated. They gloated at victory. They got Vijay, not Jay. They got victory over their enemies in the external world. But they didn't get victory over themselves, which is Jay. Janmajaya now is really confused. And he says, look, I need to understand this better. So Astik says, call for Rishi Vaishampayan. Because who was Rishi Vaishampayan? He was the gatekeeper of the story of his guru, Vedyas, which is the Mahabharata, the great storyteller. And he said, you call him and he will tell you the story of your ancestors. And maybe you will attain wisdom. And if you do, I will succeed in stopping this cycle of fight.
Vigils and bites. And then he starts the story of what actually happened. Those are descendants of Janmajaya. उसके बारे में कुछ.
So then Rishi Vaishampayan comes and he says that I will have a conversation with you, great Janmajaya. Nobody remembers as Vaishampayan Uvach.
So this is, at the inception level, this is the original. Then it goes deeper. It's a deeper conversation.
And then he of course tells the story of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and it begins actually with their ancestors. And we all know the story of the Mahabharata, don't we? Vaishampayan ultimately tells Janmajaya about the end of the war and then explains why the Kauravas and the Pandavas except Yudhishthir went to Narak. Why did Yudhishthir make it to Swarg and not first Narak? What is Swarg and Narak?
इसके ऊपर भी, दीदी, I think we should explain, because आजकल ऐसा हो गया है, there's this belief that heaven is where perfection is and hell is where there is eternal suffering. Even Indians, हम लोग इतना we have absorbed the Western way of life so much. And one of the things we have to understand the way it is told in the Mahabharata, it's not that Swarg is forever, and it's not that Narak is forever either. जब तक आपके जो demerits, if you can call it that, जब तक वो demerits burn out नहीं होते हैं, आप नरक में रहते हैं, and then you rise back again. और जब तक आपके merits spend out नहीं होते हैं स्वर्ग में, you spend out there, then you will descend back. Right? ये cycle चलता रहता है. It's not that in our way, that's धार्मिक way, that heaven is forever or hell is forever. The only thing that's forever is when you are out of this cycle of birth and rebirths and again.
And you attain wisdom. And then you reach Vaikuntha.
एक बड़ा सुंदर था, we had this conversation and with you long time on heaven and hell, Swarga, in the way it's told to us in the modern Western paradigm, कि if you are in the heaven for eternity and everything is peaceful and you're drinking wine and some versions of heaven are virgins, if you're that way for eternity, many years or many centuries you will get bored. आप करोगे क्या? It's just going on and on and on, right? Remember ये एक बार मैं आशीष का वो श्रीखंड खा गया था, ये नॉर्मल है.
Yeah.
एंड अनीस दादा ने मुझे पनिशमेंट दिया था कि दो श्रीखंड आए थे, मुझे श्रीखंड बहुत पसंद था, तो आई डीप इन माइंड एंड आशीष वॉज अ डरा, आशीष वॉज गोज टू कम बैक लेटर. मैं उसका भी खा गया था एंड आशीष वॉज वेरी अपसेट एंड अनीस दा फाउंड आउट, और आप दो तो हमारी सेकंड मम्मी डैडी थे, तो अनीस दा डिसाइडेड ही इज गोइंग टू पनिश मी with this.
Do you think sometimes they bullied you?
Yeah, of course it. I still carry the scars of it. The punishment that Dara gave, when he told me the punishment, I said, यार ये punishment थोड़ी, ये तो gift है. He sent, I remember Daya was there at that. और he got some 25 sneakers. 25, you know, जो छोटे जो मिलते थे, तो फ्रिज में रखा गया था. I was told कि I have to finish all 25 sneakers if I want to eat anything else. Okay. Otherwise, till I finish that, I'll not be allowed to eat anything else. तो बल्ले बल्ले I had started eating, I remember, by the 4th, 5th, I couldn't eat anything even. And too much of a good thing is also boring, actually. You get sick of it. And I'm connecting that to heaven. If you're spending full eternity in heaven, life will become terrible. And if you're spending full eternity in hell, after some time, does the punishment even mean anything? Means you don't feel like you
Get used to suffering also.
You get used to suffering also.
Yeah.
तो उसका क्या प्रोजेक्ट है? क्या आप इटर्निटी हेल में रहोगे? इटर्निटी हेल में रहोगे?
It stops affecting you.
It stops meaning anything, actually. So, it actually never made sense to me that this is the way it is forever. So actually, in that sense, the dharmic जो approach है, it's actually much more logical. You will come back here. and आपको जो करना है यहीं पे कर.
Nothing is forever.
Nothing is worth. And ये journey of dharma keeps going.
So
Also, back to
So what Rishi?
the long story of the Shikar.
So what? So what Rishi Vaishyampaya tells King Janmajay is that at the end of the war, what was attained is Vijay, not Jay. Vijay and Jay, you know, are the Dwarpas of Vaikuntha. When you're done with the cycles of life and death, and all the merits and demerits and merits and demerits, and this keeps happening and it keeps happening till you attain wisdom, you know, till you attain dharma. That's when you go to Vaikuntha.
Many would know this. Jay Vijay were also reborn as Ravan Kumbhakarna.
Guess which one was Jay and which one was Vijay?
I think Ravan was Jay, Kumbhakarna was Vijay. I'm not sure.
Vijay is victory over the external world. Jay is wisdom. So who had wisdom?
Yeah, you're right.
So Jay is when you attain victory over yourself and you understand that at the end of the war, the Pandavas only earned Vijay. And actually, Vijay derailed us and they glutted. So Winston Churchill said, in victory, magnanimity. I agree with it. But he also said, in defeat, defiance. Now, do I disagree completely? No. But do I agree completely? Again, no. Because in defeat, there can also be wisdom and reflection. Like in Duryodhan's case.
That is Duryodhan's case, yeah. Or actually, as you're showing in an Indian's case, you need to learn even from Winston Churchill. That is it. That is in disliked grace. He had a lot of wisdom to share, though he was very bigoted against Indians. But sorry, coming back, Duryodhan.
And I quite like the Churchillian brand of you. So that's where Jain comes in.
शब्द अच्छे थे, चरित्र पे थोड़ी सी कठिनाइयाँ थी.
And तो काफी कट्टा से करे था.
But he perfect, Duryodhan.
So Jack, you know, is a victory over himself, wisdom. And the Pandavas did quite gain it. Get it? In fact, talking about the many Gitas, a little, segue into something else. As you said, there are many Gitas. And among the many Gitas, there is one Gita called the Anu Gita.
I think, I don't know how many know of this. First time I heard it, I was laughing so much.
Yeah. So in the Mahabharata, in the Ashwamedha Parva, Sri Krishna, the war is over and Yudhishthira has been, anointed king. And Sri Krishna tells
अश्वमेध क्या हो रहा है?
Ashwamedh yagna hona chahiye and Ashwamedh yagna ho jata hai. And then Sri Krishna, having done what he had to do, is ready to go back to Dwarka. At which stage Arjun tells it, excuse me sir, can you repeat what he said?
If I remember correctly, Arjun apparently said, I have forgotten, मैं भूल गया. फिर से भगवद गीता दोहरा दीजिए. Shall Rishi please?
Yeah, can you repeat please? So Sri Krishna tells him that I'm sorry Arjun, I cannot repeat the Gita because I had अपने आप को स्थापित किया था मैंने, in a place from where I spoke the Gita. But what I can do is once again give you the nichod of Gita. And Sri Krishna again gave you those lessons, which is the Anugita.
Only thing which मेरे दिमाग में खत्म ये था कि इट इज़ द निचोड़ ऑफ द गीता. बट भगवत गीता के 700 श्लोक हैं और अनुगीता के 1000 श्लोक हैं. But this is the way dharma works.
The divine nichod.
Since you're talking about, we spoke a bit about Churchill and the West. एक चीज़ ही आना होती है और यहाँ पे we are debating it to this date that the British Raj told us, in fact told all non-Abrahamic religions कि आपके beliefs myths हैं और हमारे beliefs history, that Abrahamic religions are actual history. At least that's what they said during the colonial era कि Judaism, Islam, Christianity actual history, Hinduism, Buddhism ये सब myths हैं. और आजकल ये चलता रहता है. The entire approach was कि हमारी जो कहानियाँ हैं उसमें मिथ्या है, दे आर नॉट रियली ट्रू, एंड किसी तरह उन लोगों ने आके हमें बचा लिया क्योंकि हम तो बेचारे बच्चे थे, मन के कच्चे थे, एंड देयर रिलीजन्स वर एक्चुअल हिस्ट्री. आई हैव सम व्यूज आल्सो ऑन दिस. आप इसके बाद
Actually, you had once, shared with us your understanding of history and mythology. And you said that history is the younger brother and myth is the elder brother. And the younger brother keeps saying, nahi, I'm the one. Yeah. Youth, kuch chalti hai. And mythology is actually the wisdom behind the stories. And how do you know what is truth about history? In my childhood, I was taught the Aryan invasion theory. Today, children are being taught the Aryan migration theory.
In fact, Rumala Thapar, the high priestess of the Marxist school of history, she herself said there is no archaeological evidence for the invasion, so maybe it was migration. Otherwise, 100 साल हो गए, you couldn't find any archaeological evidence of the invasion. लेकिन आज भी that myth is used to create divisions between North India and South India.
So myths are powerful. Correct.
And actually, that's the thing that I learned, that makes understand that it's very difficult to be sure of what is the true interpretation. Very difficult. And mythology actually just accepts that. Whereas history is kind of childish. And aajkal, in the West, I was living in London for 4.5 years. I saw many modern Westerners, now they've gone to the other extreme, the leftist extreme, and they are attacking the story of Christianity all the time. The way Hinduism is attacked in India, but in the West one finds the left attacks Christianity like that. I'm not a Christian and at times I used to feel offended कि यार तो आप चीज़ का इस्तेमाल बात करो, कुछ तो इज्जत दिखाओ, even if you want to question. But they're using those same tactics. Arey, what is the truth? How do you know these? That's what they're saying. How do you know these Christ existed? That's the interpretation now. That it's the same tactic that was done 100 years ago. Just the date is different.
I don't think history and mythology can be so neatly and cleanly separated. The father of history, Herodotus himself, he wrote in his historical books that the Indians in the subcontinent had ears which reached the ground.
And actually, perhaps a wiser way to accept is that our itihas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, it actually teaches us the deeper wisdom. And मेरा मानना है, I know आपका भी मानना है कि Lord Krishna, Lord Ram, they actually existed. They were our ancestors. But I'm not insecure about it. ऐसा नहीं कि भाई मुझे अगर कोई नहीं मान रहा है तो मत मानो. I don't need to prove it to you. Because it doesn't matter whether you believe they were true or not. What matters is learn the wisdom that their story taught us. If you approach it this way, actually then there's something to be learned from Jesus Christ's story. There's something to be learned from is to around to.
Absolutely. You know,
And so to continue, there's one of the things is actually what you have to approach with a perspective of wanting to learn. There's this Indologist called Betty Doniger. Well, the first I was actually introduced to Kappa. I remember you read that book of hers. Very rarely have I found you angry. You're very affected by that book of hers, and you suggested it to me as well. And she said in an interview that the primary lesson of the Bhagavad Gita, I mean, about paraphrasing from what I remember, that man up and kill your family. That's not the lesson of the Bhagavad Gita. And if that is what you drew from Bhagavad Gita, it says more about you than about the Bhagavad Gita. It's a bit like saying the message of the Bible is don't eat apples. That's not the message of the Bible. You know, if you're saying that, then obviously you're making it. Okay? And I think that is a perfect segue into how we want to approach the Bhagavad for our audiences. What can we learn from this beautiful text which has influenced hundreds of millions of Indians through the ages and hundreds of millions of people across the
you put it so well. You know, history should be left to the historians, and spiritualism is something else. You know, Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, he said something beautiful. He said that for believers, religion is the foundation of their way of life, but for physicists, religion is the crumbs. That.
In some ways, actually, you know, एक बार remember four of us we are sitting and chatting that the true path of wisdom is you begin from a place, and actually you are on this long journey that starts with confusion, and after your entire life or maybe after many lives you come back to the same place. ये कैसा है, हमने डिस्कशन किया था कि भाई the journey isn't over till you return home. It's just that after this entire journey, when you return home, you are at the same place but with more wisdom. You know, someone who's completely stupid can believe in God. Someone who's completely wise can believe in God. But someone who's completely wise and following God actually loves a lot, benefits a lot. That is the entire point of the journey. That's all right too for what you just said about Matsky. No wonder he came up with quantum theory. Only someone as brilliant as this.
Right. Lesser scientists like Richard Dawkins are busy being offensive to us.
Oh, I don't know if you saw that video of Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson. Something to be learned from both of them. Richard Dawkins is an exceptionally smart man. वो जो that Oxford debate, that had gone for the Oxford Union debate, Richard Dawkins was actually there. I was sitting and chatting with her, said fish. Yeah, I was sitting. He's a brilliant man, right? But there is this कि भाई, to prove I'm smart, I have to insult God all the time, and I have to insult believers of the. ये उसका ये मानना है that he has to keep insulting. And Jordan Peterson is like on the other extreme कि भाई defend anything. You know, which is like sad.
Actually,
Why is that?
debate. That debate, I found it so interesting because both of them were not listening to each other at all. You know, both of them were sitting on the seat of interrogation and judgment, and they were just not listening to each other, and there was disrespect towards each other in that conversation. That is so unfortunate.
And the entire thing is सामने वाले को नीचे खींचे. It's not कि सामने वाले से आप कुछ सीख सकते, तो सुनिए. नहीं, सामने वाले को बस नीचे खींचना है.
It's again about Vijay and not Jay.
Not Jay.
That takes us back to the Gita.
That brings us back to the Bhagavad Gita. So what is the basic structure of the Bhagavad Gita that our viewers should know? And then I tell them how we're going to carry out this series.
The basic structure of the Gita is a conversation that between Sri Krishna and Arjun. Well, the two armies are arraigned against each other, the Kauravas and the Pandavas in Kurukshetra. And war is about to begin. And at that moment, absolutely, and at that moment, Arjun is assailed by doubt and he starts scratching his head and wondering, "Yeah, hona chahiye kya? Should I be elsewhere? Should I be doing this?" And he turns to his
How can I kill those I respect?
There,
बड़े हैं.
there many bade hain, many guru hain. There is Bhishma Pitama over there. There is Dronacharya. There are my cousins, you know, good, bad and ugly. If there's Duryodhan, there's also Vikar, you know. And I have played with them in my childhood. Should I be doing this? Why am I here? Assailed by doubt. And then he turns to Sri Krishna, his Sati, and says, "Can you take the chariot to the middle of the beat? Because I'm confused. I don't know where I'm doing." And then he turns around and he asks Sri Krishna. He expresses his doubts and says, "Sri Krishna, I am not sure I should be doing this. I do not want to do this. I am confused about the rightness and the wrongness of what I am just about to embark upon." And then Sri Krishna says, "I'll sing you a song for wisdom."
The song of our Lord Bhagavad Gita. And what Didi and I are going to do over the next many episodes of this Bhagavad Gita series is that we will discuss a few shlokas at the beginning of each new episode, and then we'll discuss those shlokas with what Lord Krishna explained, and then some of our own understanding, some of our own and commentaries be drawn from various texts that we have read. We will quote those commentaries as well. And the entire idea being, if we dedicate an episode to one or two shlokas, then you can learn deeper from it and, more importantly, apply it in your life. Remember, in the Indian way, philosophy it's not a subject that you just read and absorb and feel happy about. No, you have to apply it in your own life. You have to live a better life while learning those philosophies. That's what Didi and I will attempt to do over the many episodes to follow in this Bhagavad Gita series. We hope you enjoy. Namaste. That's all.
Namaste.
If you enjoyed this episode, like and share it, please. And if you want to receive the notification for the next episode, click subscribe, please. Thank you.